All right, 3, 2, 1.
Only 3 minutes late.
We are live.
Hi folks, welcome. Are we on this camera?
Yep.
Welcome to our Saturday Night Live. Just quick couple of notes. We have our first class, our first PHP class, arriving here a week from tomorrow night. I laugh only because we have a little bit of work to do. This will be the first class since our October 2019. All of our 6 classes scheduled for 2020 got wiped out because of COVID. We doubled up for 2021, thinking that we would be able to catch up. So we had 2 classes in April get canceled, 2 in May, 2 in June, 2 in July, 2 in August. And have we canceled September yet, Jake? I think we've canceled September. However, because they've at least loosened the domestic borders, we have an all-Canadian class occurring on the 23rd. The guys will actually show up here on the 22nd. 7 civilians, 7 combat wounded vets that had applied. And got lots of good stuff to tell you about that tonight. And we had a great fundraiser on our last episode. But without any further ado, let's answer some questions, and I'll just intermittently tell you stuff we need to tell you. Go ahead, Rick.
All right, first question comes from Brandon Zane in Connecticut.
Hey, Brandon in Connecticut.
He says, finding general used woodworking machines in the U.S. is difficult. What brand names more commonly found in the U.S. would you recommend for power tools?
Oh, wow. As you live close enough to the Canadian border, you're going to have just as easy/difficult as time finding general as I do. But the farther away you get from the border, the tougher it is. So what brand? Well, I would buy Rockwell Delta that was made before, say, the early 1980s. I have one right behind there. In fact, you come over and look at it real quick. I'll just point some things out to you. Any idea what the vintage this is?
No.
I'm going to guess and say that this is somewhere in the 1970s. And I say that only because it looks an awful lot like the new machines I saw delivered somewhere about that time. This is a 20-inch bandsaw. The only thing I was surprised at is it has a cast aluminum wheel, where these are almost always cast iron. But it runs smooth, it's heavy duty, it's rugged, it weighs a ton, literally. And if you look down underneath here, and you look at all of the adjustments on the guides, they're really nice. Everything is a micro adjust, which is so much better than just loosening a screw and tapping it one way or the other. The adjustment for the tables to tilt it are nice and rugged.
2 of them.
Yep, one front, one in the back. The dust collecting is really good on it. If you look in here,
Budget.
well, nothing fancy, nothing particular to see in there. But good rugged machine. I'm actually going to switch this out and put this in the other shop, and I'm bringing in the general 20-inch. Just because I'm addicted to green. So I would buy, and we had a Delta, just show them, Jake. We just switched out the jointer. We brought in our general 8-inch, and we took the Delta over there, and that too would be in a 1970 vintage, essentially the same machine, just color. So I would buy Delta or Powermatic. Powermatic, as long as it was made before Powermatic started manufacturing everything offshore. So again, you get back into the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. The secret to this stuff is bearings, belts, and motors. Those are the 3 things that wear out. And they're off-the-shelf items that you can pick up anywhere. So as long as you don't have a casting that's broken, and sometimes that can even be fixed, but I would stay away from that stuff. So Powermatic, Delta, and then Walker Turner made a homeowner's line, and I've had a Walker Turner bandsaw, and that was a great machine too. So there was a lot more, there were several companies making hobbyist type gear back in the 60s and 70s that are no longer in business.
What about Oliver?
Oliver, well, I don't know if, I mean, Yates, American, Oliver, there's a lot of companies that made big stuff, but I don't know if they made stuff that you're going to want to have in your house. I don't think, I mean, Oliver's table saw is a big table saw. And their lathes are big lathes, so find those three in that order. I would go Delta, Powermatic, and you can actually do, they're neck and neck. And then the one I just mentioned, which I can't remember what I said now.
Walker Turner.
Walker Turner. Walker Turner was a good name. Always good stuff. I always loved the adjustments on them. They were so precise. So that's what I would do. Next, Frick.
All right. Next one comes from Bob Browning in Sacramento, California.
Hey, Bob, in Sacramento.
He said, I'm not well versed in hand tools. I use them to clean up messes made with power tools. Any tips for transitioning to be more hand tool focused?
Yeah, just give me your credit card, Bob, and I will send you what you need. Learn to sharpen. So if anybody has a problem, and how often do we diagnose this? If anybody has a problem with a hand tool, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say 9.5 times out of 10 it's a sharpening issue. And of course they always tell me, no, I got it perfectly sharpened. Okay, but you go back and revisit it and it's always a sharpening issue. So the single most important element to hand tool woodworking is knowing how to sharpen. Knowing how to sharpen has two aspects. It has the equipment you're using and the technique you're using. We did a video called 32 Seconds to Sharpen. That's not a sound bite. That's not a bait and switch or clickbait. That's what the word I was looking for. It takes 32 seconds. It takes 32 seconds from the time you've taken your blade out of your plane and it's now no longer performing the way you want, to going over there, sharpening it, and then coming back and putting it back in your plane. Now, your gear. The better your gear, the better will be your edge. The better the gear, the easier it is to learn how to do it. Nobody wants to believe that, but that's just the way that it is. So you ask me the question, I'll give you the answer. Buy the system that I promote. If there was something else out there that was better, I would buy it. At this point, because this is what I do for a living, I don't care what it costs. If it's better, I'm going to get it. But fortunately, this stuff is the best that there is. The technique. So I'll give you a couple of tips on that. And I'm focusing on sharpening because the rest of the stuff I almost would say doesn't matter because you get the sharpening down and all of a sudden everything else falls into place. I can hand a sharp hand plane to someone who's never used one before, not tell them anything, and they can peel off a shaving. Who did we have in here the other day?
Oh, the cameraman.
Oh, yeah. So Canadian Broadcasting Corporation came here yesterday to do a story on, we'll tell you a little bit about that later too. And the cameraman obviously was a little bit interested in woodwork. And I was actually doing something. He wanted me to do it while he was filming. So then I handed it to him. I said, here, try it. He said, well, I never used this before. And sure enough, he pulled off a nice little shaving that was sub 1 thou, and whew, wow. Now, if he had went out and bought a hand plane and bought the sharpening gear and tried to do that at home, he probably would have failed miserably. But once that plane was sharp, nothing else changed, he'd still be able to perform. So sharpening is so critical. What most people do when they're attempting to sharpen is you have to learn or you have to develop or train several muscles. I got to do it over here where I actually do it. So this is the height that I work at. Okay, so I'm standing over here. My sharpening station is down low for a reason. If your sharpening station is up here at bench height, which is what, if no one told you, you would typically do. But the problem up here is your pivot point becomes around your wrist, which is very difficult to do that accurately. And to this motion, you have to introduce this motion or else you wear a hole in the stone. So while people are doing this, they're trying to do that at the same time. And in the process, they make a mess. If you move your sharpening station down, there's my knee, so it's just above knee height. It allows you to lean over. And by leaning over, excuse me, leaning over, you can move your pivot point from your wrist all the way up to your shoulder. So when I'm doing this, once I'm holding the chisel or the plane blade, I lock my wrist, I lock my elbow, and all the pivot comes from here. Well, the farther away I can get the pivot point from the actual cutting edge on the stone, the easier it is to maintain that angle so that I'm not rocking back and forth. Now, so that I don't wear out this part of the stone, while I'm doing this, I just fall forward, heel and toe, don't move my arms at all other than this little motion. I'm just rocking back and forth. It allows me to cover all of that. The next thing I was going to tell you is this. So when you're doing this, I mean, this motion is coming from your shoulders. There's a lot of muscles involved. what people tend to do, and they're new, is they squeeze the life out of this thing. And they squeeze it so tightly, they can't feel what's happening, because you want to be able to feel. You can tell when the stone is cutting, but you've got to learn to relax this grip. And in relaxing this grip, you have to learn to train these muscles so that you keep them in that nice path or that nice pattern. Now, some people do figure eights. Trust me, little circles are a lot easier than trying to do a figure eight, especially if you're just learning this and you're on your own. Light grip, light to moderate grip. Not much more than it would take to start to crush a firm grape, or think of holding a baby's hand or a child's hand so he doesn't get away from you, but it doesn't hurt him at the same time. So that's my number one bit of advice, and that's what I'll end on, but I will throw in this. Buy the best tools you can find. Right, Nick? Yes. What happens if you don't buy the best tools? You don't get the results. And if it doesn't frustrate you, you'll end up replacing them. So now you just made the best tool even more expensive. So buy the best tools. They're easier to learn how to do because they do their job. You just have to do yours. You buy junk, you have to do your job and you have to do part of their job, and most folks can't do both. I have a difficult time using crappy tools, so I don't. It's not worth the effort. Throw them out. Doesn't matter what they cost. It's a one-time purchase. You want to buy tools that only make you cry once when you buy it, and every other time you use it, what does it make you do, Nick? Exactly, he just did it. It makes you smile. That's my advice. Next, Frick.
All right, our friend Rex Hansen has a question.
Hello, Rex.
Currently
Dr. Rex the other day. Rex is a good example. Rex retired from his job, but instead of sitting on a rocking chair, he signed up. He's going to take a 2-year course in Boston at what's the name of that big furniture school down in Boston? It left me, but everybody's heard of it, so good on Rex. What you want to know?
He wants to know the best way to keep your marking gauges to stay tight so they don't come loose. Your marking gauges specifically.
Tighten them.
He says, is there a way to make your marking gauges stay tight so they don't come loose?
Well, mine don't come loose. I just give them good and tight. I mean, I got a fairly large thumb screw on there. So for that very reason, that you can get a good grip and really snug it up. But I haven't had an issue with mine coming tight. You might want to, you take that screw out and look at well, that wouldn't make any difference.
What would?
I thought maybe if it was mushroom in the end, but that wouldn't make any difference because it's already out of the threads.
No, you could add more serrations to the...
Or you could even shape that so that you had more of a thumb screw. But the gym. Go to the gym. Next, Frick.
All right. Next question comes from Craig Corder in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan.
Hey, Craig in Bloomfield.
All right. He says, I've recently taken up hand tools and in the course of a 2-month period had 2 urgent doctor visits for stitches after slipping and lightly hitting the base of my thumb with a chisel. What medical first aid supplies would a woodworker should a woodworker have on hand in the shop?
Well, Frick, do you want to address that?
I don't injure myself.
What did you just do the other day with a knife?
Oh, but that was a steak knife.
And Megan, you can address it. What did you do with a knife? Megan cut right through her thumb. Oh, middle finger, right through the finger, middle into the flesh. Yeah. So typically we're not doing movements like that. But the worst accident I ever saw in a class, I was teaching in Chicago, and he was down there on the back left. And as I looked up and saw what he was doing, I had to make a split decision. Do I yell and startle him and possibly initiate the problem, or do I just wait for it to happen? Well, it didn't take long. So here he was. He had a piece of wood that he was cleaning up. Chisel was sharp because we'd already had the sharpening class, and he was doing this. Okay, that's a bad move, right? The story is always keep both hands behind the cutting edge, and you're not going to cut yourself. But he slipped like this, and when in slipping, he went into the soft part of his, I almost did it, into the soft part of his forearm and out. Oh, did he bleed. Now, it was an all-day class. He made it in time for the last half of the class. So take the time. It's usually because we're in a rush and we think, oh, I don't need to do that. Take the time to clamp that piece of wood in the vise, whether it's in the vise or with a clamp. Hold it in place. Both hands behind the cutting edge. A, that opposite hand helps to support the piece to make it more accurate. And B, you're going to stick it into the wood. You're not going to stick it into yourself. Now, that was not really the question. The question was, what's typically in a we have a first aid kit sitting down there. That's one thing we haven't done yet. But Band-Aids would be number one. That's probably the single biggest thing we need in here. Hopefully you don't need a tourniquet and a soldering iron to seal those severed arteries. But I would just think a typical first aid kit. Anybody else want to add something to that? Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, they use that in Vietnam. CA glue, I've used that before too. I get, winter time, I get cracks in my thumbnail and I'll get somebody to, I'll squeeze them together and put a little CA glue on there. I don't know if it's medical grade or not, but it works. So be careful. Keep both hands behind the cutting edge. I want to say something. So this dovetail was mastered by a man named Pete Ambrose. Is Pete on there tonight? And Peter Ambrose was a Vietnam vet. He's from...
Is.
Pardon?
Is
a Vietnam vet. He also fought in the first Gulf War, so Pete was a lifer. Pete was one of the most memorable vets that we've had in our class. He's from Mississippi, and he sent me this afterwards to prove to me that he could do it, hence the Canadian and the U.S. flag. And I got a message from Pete this week, and sadly his son has passed away. And Pete, I feel for you and your family. Gone but not forgotten, and life is eternal. We will see them again. Don't worry about it. Miss them between now and then, but hopefully you're getting through this, and our heart goes out to you, and everyone in here feels the same way. So Pete Ambrose, great guy. Hope he's on. By the way, if you're a combat wounded vet that has been to one of our classes, as represented, can we peek that out there?
Yep.
As represented by one of these, tell me how far we can go and you still hear me.
So far, so good.
Okay, so this is just temporary.
No, you're cutting out now.
No, this is just temporary. Here, can you come any closer?
Yeah.
Or can you see it? So these aprons on the wall, this was Luther's idea. This was the first one. So class number 1 and number 2 didn't get it because Luther came to class number 3. So this apron represents 2 classes. And each of these patches represent guys that were in the class. This is actually Luther's. This is Jesse Rufian's. Jesse's coming. He's going to be my assistant next week. That's Kyle Perrell, Newfoundland Regiment, Canadian. Who else is up on there, Jake? Do you remember? If I start this and I don't remember some, I'll feel bad. Anyway, so this would have been, what year?
April 17.
April 17? And then this is the 2 classes in November of 17, and right on down through the last class we had, which if you can't see it, but it's really dirty and worn out because it was the October class of 2019 that I wore for
A year?
well over a year, whereas the rest of them would only get 6 months use at the most. This apron is the one, our intermediary one between now, the last class and the next one. And this represents various individuals, some firemen, some police. This is Herman DeMaio. You remember Herman? We did the special on Herman, the World War II vet. And that is, who's that? Is that Al?
No.
Who's that? Oh, that's Mark Smith. Yeah. Anyway, if you're a combat wounded vet that's been to our class, if you're represented out there, please, and you're on here, we'd love to say hello to you. So tell Megan, so just do @Megan and your name and tell us what class you were in so we can shout out and give me a smile, just knowing that you're there.
Philip Lawrence is there.
Philip Lawrence, I was looking back at some, actually, so everybody ought to do this. If you go on our website, under the Purple Heart, it has Wall of Heroes, and it shows pictures of all the guys in their battle rattle, which is their, in their combat assignment, and then a current picture, and I saw Phil's in there today, so glad you're here, Phil.
And Bob is here.
Bobbert, I was talking to Bob this afternoon. Tried to get a special guest on tonight, but I wasn't able to reach him. I haven't been able to the last few days. Hopefully we will. Bob? Anyone else? Next question, Frick?
Okay. Next question comes from Kevin M. in Cranbrook, British Columbia.
Hi, Kevin. I've been to Cranbrook several times.
He says, I'm starting a butcher block project soon. I know that end grain to end grain glue ups have no strength, but should I put glue on them anyway during the process?
So if you're making a butcher block, typically you're going to have, you're going to be cutting down into your end grain. So you're going to glue up all of your pieces, and you're going to have exposed end grain on the top. So you're really not gluing any of the end grain, you're gluing the long grain. So you're going to go in, I don't really have something I could show you, but if you can imagine, you're going to go in and glue a whole bunch of pieces together so that everything you see is all end grain. And that's the toughest part, so that's typically where you end up cutting down into. So you won't have any glue on the end grain, you're only going to have it on the long grain as you glue all those pieces together. Next, Frick.
Okay, Drew from Orlando, Florida.
Hi, Ed. You
Drew.
Ed Drew?
Drew from Orlando, Florida.
Drew from Orlando, Florida, which is one of our favorite places to go.
Yes, it is. What does Rob
You want to
think?
shed a few tears, Frick?
It's been too long. What does Rob think about router sleds for flattening wood?
So what Drew is talking about, if I wanted to, here's a big piece of Port Orford cedar.
Super Dave calls that Port Orchard.
Port Orchard? And Super Dave's not on tonight. He's away at a charity event, which he's the life of the party. So what Drew is talking about is, instead of going in with a scrub plane, a hand plane, and flattening all of this, a router sled, in a nutshell, would be securing this on the bench, having two rails, obviously running the full length, and then you would have your router on a flat piece that would span these two. You'd have a big wide bit on the bottom, and you would move the router along these two rails, and it would go in there and surface the board. Yeah, I mean, lots of people use them. I don't know if I've ever done it or not. I may have. So if I have, and I no longer, it's because, I've got all the jointers, and I've done it enough. I can whip it out by hand quick enough. So if that's what you want to do, then, and it works, by all means, just, you want to be well, yes, you want to be, I'll give you a little tip. You want to be careful just because you really don't have any support. You're freehanding that router bit. Anytime I've done something where I'm using a router in a freehand application like that, if you can, just add some weight to the sled, preferably out on the ends, just so that it's not causing your platform to bow like that. But the heavier it is and the more resistance, it gives you a little more control. If it's too light and that router bites in and grabs it, pulls it out of your hand. But if that is weighted down, it'll just make it a lot easier, a lot more controllable. Next, Rick.
Okay, next one comes.
Nick, you feel like adding something, speak up. Nick's here. Nick.
You can box your router in too.
What?
You can like box your router in, so it can't move. I guess it can move side to side.
Oh, you mean so that? Yeah, I know what you mean. So it can't go this way and this way.
And it supports it as well.
Yeah, yeah. You could probably look up and get a lot of. You probably find a lot of YouTubes on that too, because people do it quite a bit. Especially if you're limited and you don't have big jointers.
We had a comment from the chat from a username Wet Rock. He says the guy meant a butcher block counter. He needs finger joints for end grain.
He meant even a butcher block counter, unless he plans on using it long grain. But so if that's what you're doing, if you're gluing a whole bunch of pieces together, I would go ahead and I would put glue on them, because you're not going to glue it like this. You're not going to glue pieces together like that. You're going to stagger them, right? So that staggering bit is going to help. But yeah, I'd go ahead and glue them. Just if nothing else, it might give you a little bit of a water seal. And make sure you use a waterproof glue. So use Type Bond 3. Next, Rick.
All right, Lee Watson from Leeds, England.
Hi, Lee from Leeds, England.
He says, hi all, how do I sharpen a marking knife and wheel gauge?
How do I sharpen a marking knife and a wheel gauge? Well, let's do the wheel gauge first because that's really easy. Jake, have I got a spare cutter
For what?
for a marking gauge?
No, probably not.
Okay, well, we'll take one off. So I'm going to take my marking gauge and get a hold of it. So here's your cutter. Now, if you end up getting big nicks in it, you're probably just as well off to replace it. This is real simple. You don't really need to go beyond 1,000 grit. So on the diamond plate, set that down face down and just face hone it. So I've got my finger on the end and just do a bunch of little circles. And if you want, you can turn it every once in a while in case you're not wearing evenly. Tight little circles. And then to test it, to know when it's sharp, you should be able to, holding it in your hand, make a nice severed line across a piece of wood, and then you know it's good and sharp. Now, the next question you asked about was sharpening a marking gauge knife. Now, not a marking gauge knife, a marking knife, and I typically don't want my marking gauge knife sharp. I'll tell you why. If you're talking about using it for dovetails, it's not in there.
Grab the striking knife.
Oh, I got one right here. Ow. Oh, there's so many pointed things in here. So here's when I developed my dovetail marking knife a lot of years ago. I specifically wanted a blade that wasn't extremely sharp. If it's extremely sharp and you're going in there and you're trying to trace your dovetail onto your pin, if it's really sharp, it has a tendency to want to follow the grain. And it's very difficult to see. That's a thin line. So if it's not so sharp, it'll make, for a little wider line, it doesn't follow the grain as easily, easier to keep it tight against the side of the pin as you're dragging it through like that. So I wouldn't want to sharpen that. But if you do, and this actually has a bit of a radius on the end, but probably best to take it out of the blade, out of the knife, the handle, and just go in there. And you can always, probably the best tip I can give you is this. Go in there and, wrong one. Go in there and paint. This has already got something black on it anyway. Go in there and paint the edge. Just kind of you got to get an angle a feel for where the angle is. And then you're just going to go in there and you're rolling a little bit if it's round. Check and see where your pen mark is. Put it back on if you need to. Once you get that side, then you're going to flip it over and do the same thing. But if you're just doing little wee tight circles, if you're trying to do it like this, you're probably going to be all over the place. But little wee tight circles is much easier to hold on to or maintain. That would be my suggestion on a little marking knife blade. Next, Frick.
All right, next one comes from Thomas Vincent in Plymouth, Michigan.
Tom Vincent in where?
Plymouth, Michigan.
Plymouth?
Yep,
As in the car?
I guess so. Probably made in Michigan.
Probably.
Rob, do you do any exercises to improve your woodworking, like improving your hand strength for better dexterity? Thanks.
Well, if you look at the back of our classroom, we have a little gym we have set up.
We'll see that later.
Yeah, we will, because we're going to show you a video of what's going on out there. Yeah, you know what? If you're working by yourself, you're moving big timbers around, especially if you're trying to cut a piece of plywood. If you're planing, chiseling, you need grip strength, and as you get older, that starts to wane. Plus, you get a bit of arthritis. So I had a local machinist make me a hand exerciser. It's like a big U, and you reach in, you put the plates down on there, and you reach in and you just grab it, and it helps strengthen your hands. So, yeah, not a bad idea. If you're going to do this, you have to have some grip strength, just holding on to things. And I think the more strength you have, the greater control you have, even though it's not about how tight you grip something. It's actually, you want a nice, comfortable grip, but certainly it's advantageous. So, yes, exercises for your hands, for your wrists, you need that control. Never been asked that before. Next.
This comes from Peter in Melbourne, Victoria.
Australia.
Yep.
Peter?
He says, do you use wax on your saw blades?
Do I?
Yep.
Not routinely, but sometimes. If you're making a cut and your saw starts to jam on you, you can take some RobCosman's Magic Plane Wax, also known for saws, and go on there and just do a squiggly S like that on both sides. And it's amazing how that will free it up as it starts to go through. Alan Peters would occasionally do it on his dovetail saw. So he would go in, do the same thing, just put a little squiggly on there, and sometimes just take your thumb and forefinger and just work that around. But I would rather have the set, and that's the big deal about our saw. Alan didn't make saws, we do. So we make our saws so that you have just 2/1000ths of an inch set per side. So that's a piece of writing paper is 4/1000ths. So we've got half that thickness on either side. What that allows is for the saw to make it through the wood, but no slop. So you really shouldn't need it, but on a hand saw, occasionally you may, and it makes a big difference putting a little wax on there. It's a nice thing about that. Now, let me give you a little shameless commercial. Kevin Burris, combat wounded vet, EOD, 27 years, I believe. Kev, when he came to the class, as a result of Super Dave, Kev introduced us to he had brought one of these, not my branded ours. The only thing I didn't like about it is the wax was really soft. So we got in touch with the guy who makes these, and I think we went through 4 different formulas before we finally got it exactly what we wanted. And what we want was hard enough that it doesn't smear, soft enough that it leaves a little bit of a film. And the fact that it's in this container and you just roll it up as you need it, it works out just wonderful. So it is our #1 selling item off our website. Get some. Actually, get them. Do you still get the deal? 1 for 10, 2 for 15. Yeah, I use it all the time. It makes a huge difference. Go ahead on my planes, but yes, on saws as well. Next, Frick.
All right, Jim Crum in Pentwater, Michigan.
Jim in where? Somewhere in Michigan?
Pentwater.
Pentwater?
Yep.
Okay.
He says, I'm starting to build the Cosman workbench and wondering what surface you put together the top so you end up with it being flat. I know how critical a flat work surface is and want to make sure I end up with a perfectly flat surface.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to read that again, please.
He's wondering what surface you put together the top. I think he's missing a word in there, but...
What surface you put together? Yeah.
What surfaces you put together for the top? But
No, I'm not quite...
That's why we use MDF.
Yeah. So if we did it, Luther came up and Frick and Jake videotaped it. We did a 4.5-hour video on building the Cosman workbench. And a lot of it was focused around how do you glue up that top so that it stays nice and flat. So tip #1 is get the 1-inch MDF. 1-inch MDF is going to be a lot flatter and easier to work with than the 3/4. But you have to have a flat base to have it on. So in the video, we will show you how we build the base first. And you can actually build a base whose top is perfectly flat. It's not that difficult. And then you end up putting your first piece of MDF down on top of that, and that's going to serve to keep that bottom piece nice and flat. It's a bit of an issue, but doable. But biggest tip, get the 1-inch MDF, and it's available. You can find it. Not everybody carries it, but somebody in your town will be able to get it for you. Next, Frick.
Okay, next one comes from Danny in Queensland, Australia.
Hi, Danny.
He says, what tips and advice can Rob give about hand cutting double dovetails? I do cut these myself and achieve acceptable results, but I'm sure Rob can have valued input.
Double dovetails.
Just like they cut
A houndstooth?
one, no, like they cut one dovetail, cut it off, and then it's like an inlaid dovetail.
Let Nick answer that, because I'm not sure what a double dovetail is.
It'd be like this, and then they cut it off on the op, cut it off, and then they'll do another dovetail into a smaller one. If you know what I mean.
Here, I got a picture if you want to come
You
see.
have a picture?
Put it up on the screen.
Well, I'd have to save it and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
too
I'll
much
go
work.
over here.
You can
You didn't get your dinner tonight, Frick. Oh, this, a double dovetail. Well,
like-
yeah, I see it. That's typically something that's done with a router, but I'm sure it can be done by hand. Well, you know what? I've never done it, so I can't comment on it for you. Might have to take the. Well, actually, I did something like that one time, but I just did it with veneer, so the dovetail was outlined by a different color veneer. And if I was going to do that again, all I would do is put the dovetail together, saw through the joint line, and then glue in a piece of veneer. Like this. No, that's not. That's a different example altogether. So yeah, I'm sorry. I can't answer that one for you because I've never done it. There's something here on my bench that I wanted to mention. Oh, when are we going to show them? Let's
8
show.
o'clock.
Can we show them now?
No, 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock because that's when my food's coming.
Oh, okay. How long is it?
It's the video. It's only like 6 minutes.
So we're gonna because we can't walk out into the shop because the camera Wi-Fi doesn't work or whatever. We filmed this just before we shot our video, before we turned the camera on tonight. We went through and I walked you through the shop to show you where we are, show you our mess hall and everything else, and yeah, it's fantastic. Looking forward to it. I can hardly wait for next Sunday night. Okay, next question, Frick.
We did that one.
Did we ever get the names from Jack on who built those benches? Jake?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, well, right after we do that, we'll give them a shout out.
All right, this question comes from George Liverman
Hi,
in
George.
New Providence, Pennsylvania. He says, I see Rob wearing the magnifying goggles I use. My vision is pretty bad, making detail work pretty difficult. I wonder if Rob has found any other vision aids that might also help me.
No.
Costco cheaters. By the way, Frick, pick me up another package, would you please?
Sure.
Well, let me just, since he mentioned that, I'll just show you. So we shot our YouTube tonight on mounting the hinges. So this is going to be my PPE. I hate even saying that because of all this COVID crap.
Well, I don't know why you
But
are. Only half of
personal
that stuff is
protective.
protective.
That's protective, that's protective, that's
Yeah.
2/3.
No, there's 2.
Well, okay. But what else am I supposed to have in here? There's something
That's
else
it.
missing. Oh, yeah? Anyway, since I chase around all over the shop, 2 shops, looking for this stuff, so we made this door, but it's really cool because it won't slam.
It also won't close.
No, it'll close.
Oh, wait.
What?
Okay, no, never mind.
Actually, it'll close, but it's bumping into that. So, what he's talking about are these. I have 2 of them. They're not that expensive. I have 2 of them. One, I have a 3 magnifier, whatever that means. And the other, diopter, and one's a 5. I use the 3 more often. Anyway, we just got to get these things mounted so we can hang them up in there. But
Can you tell us what you're giving away today?
yes, I can. We are giving away, thanks for mentioning that. So, Super Tony, can we call him Super Tony?
No.
No?
Mediocre Tony.
Dave would be jealous?
Just need a
Middle-
different super
Middle
word.
Tony.
Little Tony.
No. He's a bottom third.
Oh, yeah. Great,
Great kid, tries hard.
great kid, tries hard, bottom third. So Tony is Tony Bahadur is 27 years retired, recently retired, just a few months ago, medically retired, Canadian Army. Did a tour in Haiti, did one in Bosnia, and did 4 tours in Afghanistan. And Tony got accepted to the program back in for 2020. Of course, COVID hit, so he comes here, hangs out here 2 days a week, does lots of stuff for us.
Lots of breaks.
Yes, he has lots of breaks. Tony's going to be in the class next week, but Tony had got these made, and we're giving away how many?
3.
3. So this is black and white ebony, black walnut, and beech. So there's a whole bunch of different woods in it. So I think you'll like this. I'm going to open it up and show it to you. I think I am. Yeah. Is there a little note in here? Oh yeah, somebody's guy's business card. So he says, if you've never had a pen stolen, keep practicing. I don't quite get that, but anyway, this is the pen. So it has a rifle for a clip, and isn't this cool? This is how you load it. There's your. That looks like a 30-06, but what is it? No, I don't know. That's cool. So we have 4 of these to give away.
3.
3? I thought you said 4.
No.
And in addition to that, we have 3 Purple Heart sweaters. Thanks to Moose, who isn't here tonight because he's babysitting his son's dog. The famous dead cat sweater with the Purple Heart logo. Keep you warm in any season. Or you can get the Purple Heart logo on the golf shirt. Your choice. Just tell us what you want and what size. We'll give away 3 of those. We're giving away 3 of the pens. And we're giving away, for every $1,000 increment in funds raised, we will give away a medium tenon saw and a joinery crosscut saw. So we'll just... Well, no, 1 and 1, yeah. So the first 1,000 we'll give away medium tenon. On the second 1,000 we'll give away joinery crosscut, medium tenon, joinery crosscut right on out the line. Lots of prizes. Okay. Next, Frick.
Shoot.
I better put this back in.
Do you ever? This one comes from Orest. Is his name? Orest in Hamilton.
Ontario?
Doesn't say. It
Or
just says
Bermuda?
Do you ever use a sliding compound for your power tool table surfaces, like the table saw, bandsaw, joiner, etc.?
Do I
Yeah,
ever?
wax.
Pardon?
A sliding-
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do, all the time. And strictly by accident. So this is tree wax. And the only thing I like about it is it's all hardened. So now what I do is I just take a piece of a chunk like this, I go on, I paint it all the way on, and then let it sit for a while and then buff it off. And it makes a huge difference on your table saw, on your table saw fence, on the sole of the, on the base of the table of the planer, on my jointer fence, on the jointer table. We also use it. Never usually do it on the bandsaw because that's typically not an issue, but yeah, anywhere you want it to slide. Table saw would be probably the number 1. So much easier. It takes away that resistance, so you're not having to push so hard. You don't have to push so hard. You get more. You get the control back.
It's the same phrase that you use on your plane.
Yes, less effort, more control.
No. So that your effort is spent pushing your board through
the blade instead of over the saw.
table.
Yes. Yes, I do. Megan? Hi, Kev. There he is. Next, Frick.
All right. Next one comes.
Kev's taking Super Dave's place tonight.
This one comes from John in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Hi, John.
He says, what is the best or easiest way to determine the grain direction? I've heard it explained different ways, and I believe I've seen you use your hand to feel the grain. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, Megan, Mickey's trying to get in. I don't know if the door's locked or not, but he's standing there with a sad face. So, here's a piece of wood. And sometimes, and you can be fooled, so if you look at this, the grain lines appear to be running like this. So if I looked at that, I would say, well, obviously I want to plane in this direction. Sometimes you flip it over here and you see the exact opposite, so a little bit confusing. So usually you can tell with your hand. Now it takes a little while to develop this, but if I run my hand this way compared to that way, you don't see it on a piece of maple like this because it's so small, but wood is like a bunch of drinking straws all glued together. So one way, it's like if you had a handful of drinking straws and you tried to cut them with a knife, if you took your knife and you tried to come this way, they'd all be breaking and you'd a lot of resistance. But you could go that way and they would cut smoothly. Same thing when you're planing. So when you run your hand this way, how much resistance do you feel compared to going that way? Well, I feel much less resistance going this way than I do that way. Let's try it. Let's try it and see. We have a guest.
Two.
Two guests.
Hey, that's all. I said we're filming. He goes, no, you're not.
Say hi. Say hi.
Okay.
Hi. Hi.
Now, if your plane is good and sharp, it shouldn't matter, but it's usually you're going to get a better surface in one direction than you are in another. The blade needs to be sharpened. So that came off nice and smooth. Turn around this way and try it. Now, I would suspect just from the resistance that this is going against the grain, but you know what? It's super smooth in both ways, so. Sometimes you can be fooled, but usually you can tell. I trust the feel test, FEEL test, more than I trust sighting, looking at the grain. On open porous wood like oak, you can usually see. You can see the shape of it, and you can tell which way to go versus the closed porous wood like cherry or maple, which are much easier, much harder to see. Next, Rick.
All right, next
I'm
one.
watching the clock just because I know we're going to do our little tour at 8 o'clock.
Next one comes from Mark Miles, Ocate, New Mexico.
Hi, Mark.
He says, I
Ocate.
like the IBC chisels, but before investing them, I would like to know what the difference between a bench chisel and a paring chisel is.
Well, actually, I have something I can show you. You're going to lose me for a second.
Do you have the Jeopardy theme song here?
So I have a good friend in Ontario. His name is Dennis Lee. I've known Dennis for years. Met him actually came to the very first class I taught in Ontario way back in 2000. And Dennis knows that we're putting a nice display in our classroom of different tools. So he sent me a set of 3 Stanley 760s or 750s, 720s. Never been used, new in the box. And paring chisels tend to have long handles, longer blade, whereas there's a bench chisel. Do I ever need this? Never. Have I ever wanted this? Never. Not this particular chisel, but I don't know where people, I think sometimes they're just filling up the tool cabinet. They talk about butt chisels. I refuse to sell them. You don't need them. That's your chisel. That's what you need. What you need on a chisel is this. This is a beveled edge chisel. You can call it a bench chisel. You can call it whatever you want. But what's important is that you have the bevel on the side. See this one? The bevel is more on the top. You want the bevel on the side so that when you're cutting and chopping in between 2 dovetails, there's clearance here and you're not banging into the side of the tail. This one's not too bad, but you can see the difference in the width of that little landing. Now you have to have that little flat spot, square spot right there. If not, this bevel comes right down to the back and it leaves a knife edge. Just slice your fingers. This one is too much. This one is just right. And that slope needs to be sufficient that it's going to be more greater than any dovetail you're going to cut. Well, you're not going to use a dovetail with that kind of a slope on it. So that works. So this is all you need. All the rest of that stuff, I don't get it. And I've been doing this for a while, so I haven't figured out a need yet. If there's two types of chisels you want, actually, let me lay this out while we're talking about it. Oh, can I tell them? I'm not allowed to tell them. So here's a mortise chisel. There's a beveled edge chisel. Here is another specialty chisel. I'm going to give you ones that I really use a lot. Okay. So start here first. We just talked about that. This is what you call your beveled edge, your bench chisel, whatever. And it comes, if you had one a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, and 3/4, you probably would never need another one, with the possible exception being this. This is an 1/8 inch. We make these ourselves. And the reason why is there's going to be times when you can't get a 1/4 inch chisel in there, you need something smaller. Okay, so I'll put that in as an exception. Let me just visualize this for you so you can see. Where's my 3/4?
That's it.
So I would consider this to be a complete set of the necessary beveled edge chisels. Okay? Now, that'll do most, that's what you're going to use the most. However, when you come to chopping mortises, you need a different style of chisel. This is called a mortise chisel. It's much thicker in comparison. You're going to be really wailing on it. I mean wailing. So it needs to be robust. It has sides that are square to the back so that when you're chopping and it gets down into the mortise, these sides help give some registration so it's not twisting on you as you go. It's ideal. Can you cut a mortise with this? Well, yeah, you can, but this is made for it. And typically in this you're going to want, in fact, if you wanted to, I would probably consider this to be the minimum, 1/4, 3/8, and a 1/2. And that'll pretty much take care of you. Now over here, this is called a half blind dovetail chisel. And what this is designed to do is when you're cutting half blinds and you have a back on there, meaning you don't get to cut all the way through like you would on a set of through dovetails, you've got to work into a corner, a closed or a sealed corner on both sides. This allows you to get into the left corner, get into the right corner. Because this is straight on, instead of using a skew chisel, which is angled on the end, that causes you to push with your line of force off, and remember you're cutting through end grain, so it's a tough cut. This one chisel does both corners, keeps your line of force straight on, makes it much easier. We custom grind these right here. And then this is my 17 degree, and I stumbled upon this accidentally, or not accidentally, but yeah, I suppose accidentally, trying to find a chisel that would perform better in soft woods. It wouldn't crush the fiber. Didn't matter how sharp I got these 25 degree, they still would crush the fiber. So in playing with this, I ended up grinding it to 17 degrees. And it was just the right amount, so that now that'll go into a piece of pine or cedar and slice through that effortlessly and leave a nice clean surface without crushing those fibers. So that would be a pretty complete set. However, if you do a lot of softwood work, pine, cedar, basswood, I would throw in a 1/4 inch there as well. You're probably going to need something narrower than this when you're cutting in between the tails. What else have I got up here? Well, I've got a 3/8 beveled edge chisel that you could live without. I got a 1 inch you could live without. And I've got 2 different sizes. I have a total of 3 different sizes of half blind dovetail chisels. And if you're doing a lot of small work, you're going to need a small one because that would be too big. And then over here, I've got a 3/16 mortise chisel. And that has its purpose too, because when you're going in and cleaning out the debris from the bottom of a mortise, I find if you try to use a beveled edge chisel, it just flexes too much. So I like the stoutness. However, if I was going in and cutting a 1/4 inch mortise, to try to go in there and remove the waste, it's really tight in the chisel. I mean, it's really tight in the mortise, and you risk messing up those sides. So I always prefer to come in with a smaller, a narrower chisel that has the stoutness, but allows me to get in and get that jammed up stuff out of the way without messing up the sides. So there you go. Chisels 101. Next, Frick.
All right, next one.
Hey, Harry, come here. Show them your hair. Show them your bouffant. Oh, you have beautiful hair, Mickey. Beautiful hair.
You can see you, Coop.
Yeah, beautiful hair.
All right, next question comes from Fabio in Rochester.
Pardon? Bobby?
Fabio.
Oh, Fabio.
I think he was one of our winners.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Rochester. He says, does your shop have a shaper, and what are your thoughts on shapers versus router tables?
So I'm looking over here, Nick, and smiling because Nick went to an auction this week, and he bought a saw stop, fairly new saw stop. Got it at auction and probably saved a couple $1,000s anyway. And he also picked up a shaper. And I said, Nick, never use it. I have how many shapers? 2?
One that you own.
Oh, yeah, right. One I sold to somebody 15 years ago, and he's never come to pick it up. He paid for it. We use our shaper. We use it to clamp when we make our. Actually, we used to. When we make our shooting boards, we clamp them over a form, and we used to use the shaper table to do that with. We don't use it. I told Nick this. I said, the first time you stick a piece of wood into those helicopter blades, you'll think twice about a shaper. No. It's probably a reason why companies started coming out with these type of bits. Matched, oh, this thing weighs a ton. Matched router bits that are designed to fit on a 1/2-inch router. They do the job of what a shaper would, but without having the expense of a big shaper. I just am not a fan. It's a dangerous tool. I mean, the cutters that they sell here in North America are illegal in Europe. Big 3-wing cutters where you have that much exposed cutting face. Oh. Anytime I've used it, and I mean, back when I was starving and having to do kitchens, it was just, wasn't fun. Was not fun. Too noisy, too dangerous, moves too much wood. Not a fan at all. Get yourself a 1/2-inch router and a router table, but don't be putting on huge cutters on the router either. So, no, you don't need a shaper. If you do, I'll sell you one. I've got 2 that we don't need. Next.
You want to do the video?
Yeah.
Say
So, just give this a quick little introduction. I've been wanting to show you folks, you've been so generous in helping us, but you're doing it because you know it's our duty. We owe these people. And Jake and I and all of our team here have really invested a lot in this. We have a 4,000 square foot building. We use this little part right here. The rest of it's going to get used 6 weeks of the year. But we wanted the perfect setting. We wanted a place that had great lighting, perfect benches, a great kitchen, a dining hall. We want to be able to contain it right here. We bring these guys in around 7 in the morning, and we're here until 11 o'clock at night. We do that for 6 days. If you have to go out to eat three times in the day with that many people, you lose too much time. So we eat great food. Megan, my wife, and my daughter Erica have all had a food safety course. We've got a chef that's a professional chef that's going to help out. Frick, you going to do some barbecuing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to tell you a little story too. So we treat these guys, and I say the guys, I mean the vets as well as the civilians, as our guests, and we feed them the very best. But it's going to be awesome. The classroom's been all painted. We've got some more artwork to be done. I'm going to tell you a little more about that after you've seen this. What else I want to tell you? Oh, so here's a good, nice little feel-good story. So Frick loves to barbecue.
You should tell it after. I think it would go better after the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So without further ado, here's a tour of the new Joe Power Memorial Workshop. Enjoy. We had to film this a little bit early because we couldn't get the gear out here for the live, but I wanted to bring you up to date on where we are. Remember, we got guys showing up here a week from tomorrow night. So painting was all done thanks to Bo. No, did Bo do any? I know Annika did. Annika and Loren.
Chloe definitely did.
And Chloe and my wife and Junior. So the painting is all done. This wall is going to be really incredible when it's done. For now, we just have the aprons representing the guys that have been to the class, with the exception of class number 1 and 2, and we're trying to pull that together. Up here in the top, before we have the guys show up next week, it's going to say, welcome to the Joe Power Memorial Workshop. I'll tell you more about Joe Power later tonight. So my shop's in there. If we look out over here, we've got 13 of the 14 benches. We've got one more bench coming from a bench brigade volunteer. We picked up 5. I'm going to mention their names tonight. I'm right here. Really impressed with the build. The tops are just in the other shop. They had to be drilled for the bench dogs, and the vices mounted. That's why we don't have them yet. All that machinery along the side is going to be for sale. Al, who's a combat wounded vet that works here, loves to do that. So we buy the machinery, he restores it, paints it all up, makes it look brand new. Got an extra lathe as well. This wall is where our displays are going to be. So one of them is going to be a history of my saw, how it started from the first model right up until today. Luther sent us a bunch of old hand saws, so we'll do a display of hand saws on there. Over here, we've got some other back saws. Luther sent these, a couple of them I had. This is a saw that belonged to the father of a good friend of mine, John Robichaud. And his name is Leonard Robichaud. He was a World War II vet, Canadian as well, fought all the entire war. So then our new little saw, which is going to look just like that, and it's that much closer to being ready, is going to be named the Len Robichaud saw. Fella down in Texas, thank you, sent us this just as a display. This is the largest one-handed saw I've ever seen. We're going to kind of cut dovetails with that. So let's start over here. Exercise equipment is going to stay here if the guys want to use it. It's here for Bo, so he can become Mr. Universe. So we got our quiet room done. A couple of couches, a little bit of artwork on the wall, put a sink in. Everything's insulated. However, the door is not solid. So I've got a solid door we got to get that replaced with, so it'll be nice and quiet in here should they need it. Most of these guys have had traumatic brain injuries, and sometimes they get debilitating headaches. Ignore this stuff for a minute. So we have 2 bathrooms. This is our wheelchair accessible, big enough to spin a wheelchair around. Over here, Rick. Just in case you're being tempted to come up. This is our other bathroom. A little bit of artwork on the walls, nice and clean, bright. So yesterday we went into the used restaurant equipment. This is the last piece of the puzzle. And that stuff is incredibly expensive. So this is our sanitizing dishwasher. These are stainless steel countertops that we have to have. I'm going to take you in here, which is the pride and joy of the whole thing. I love MASH. This is our MASH mess hall, thanks to Kevin Lasky, who did the artwork. We've got the last couple of pieces done. Just going to close this door. So on this wall, everybody knows who these characters are. You can see the wounded coming in the helicopters. Over here, we've got Colonel Potter with the horse. The horse actually belongs to, it was my daughter Loren and Kenzie's first horse that died. Over there we have Ferret Face and Hot Lips checking things out. BJ and Hawkeye had an episode where they tell him practical jokes and shaved off half of BJ's mustache. Here's Igor, the cook that couldn't cook. I thought this was a great shot to be right where you get your food. The expression tells you, I have no idea what you're getting. This will be our service counter. Over here we've got Charles and Colonel Flagg. I think Colonel Flagg was my favorite guest on that show. Accused of being with Army intelligence, but his famous line was, I have nothing to do with intelligence. Now over here, this is the last piece. So we've got guys showing up here a week from tomorrow. And we have to pull this all together. So our plumber and our electrician and all the boys that usually make tools are going to be working in here this week. Everything is mapped out where it needs to be. We just got to get it all put into place. We managed to get a used big heavy duty oven. And we really scored big. We got a nice big refrigerator with glass doors. That's only a couple of years old. That'll go in there. This part of this wall is coming out to make the kitchen a little bit bigger. And we'll be able to serve first-class meals. And the guy with the camera, Frick, is going to handle breakfast and barbecues. Out back, we'll tell you about the community effort that went into this as well. later on in the episode, but I just wanted to give you a quick over. Oh, by the way, ceiling got painted. Jake did all the lights, tried to make it look just like it was in the mess hall. And a special thanks to Tony. Tony's Bahadur, our other combat wounded vet, come in here and volunteered. And Tony, so the idea is you're sitting in the mess hall, looking out, there's the tent posts, and up there you see the canvas that's rolled up. Tony did all that for us. It looks fantastic. Okay, back over for questions.
You're back on.
Hi. So I want to introduce Joe Power. As I mentioned in there, I'm just looking to see if I have the picture that I was hoping I had, and I don't think I do. I don't. So here's his crest. So the SD&G Highlanders, where are we? Over here?
Yeah.
We're a Canadian battalion in World War II. And Joe Power was my neighbor. Now, we live in a small community, so anybody within a mile was your neighbor, but Joe only lived at the bottom of the hill. And I grew up with his son Murray and Terry. Terry was older, but Murray mostly. And all I knew about Joe Power was that he was a really nice guy. He was always friendly. He couldn't use his right arm and nor his right leg. I know he had a brace on his right leg, so he would walk and he would drag that leg off to the side. And he had a really heavy speech impediment. And I know he had a steel plate in the back of his head. Well, he was my hero. And I can't tell you why, other than the fact that I just admired the fact that this was a World War II vet that got blown up in the war, and I just thought, wow, this is a guy that people should look up to. And I did. Later on in life, so Joe couldn't work. He, like Murray just told me, imagine being retired at 22. But all of my growing up life, I would see Joe. Joe would be out walking around. He'd always do his walk to get some exercise. And then it got to a point where he could no longer walk, so he was confined to a wheelchair. So anytime it was a sunny day, because it wasn't far from my shop, my old shop, I would go down and I would get Joe in the wheelchair and I would walk him out around and give him a chance to get some air. And then sadly, Joe eventually passed away. So when we came to this place, I often wondered what really prompted me to start this whole PHP. Of course, Jesse was the trigger, but there had to be something earlier than that because I always had this admiration for veterans. And I realized it was Joe. So this shop is going to be named the Joe Power. So this is the Joe that I remember. The Joe Power Memorial Workshop. Joe signed up at age 17, imagine a kid, in 1939. Spent a couple years in Newfoundland training before he went overseas. Spent more time training over in England. And then Joe literally fought across Europe, including D-Day. Joe was, on March 10th, 1945, a mortar came over the wall where they were behind and killed his friend, and Joe got hit with a piece of shrapnel in the back of the head. He was unconscious. He was conscious enough to know that he'd been hit, but the next time he woke up was 3 months later in a hospital in England. And as that injury left him paralyzed on the right side. But Luther is doing a documentary, and you will have your socks knocked off when you find out the SD&Gs and what those guys went through and the amount of battle that they saw. It's impressive. So my artist friend is going to, on each one of these panels on this wall, if you look closely, each panel is going to be a depiction. Actually, all I can tell you right now is the first panel is going to be Joe's recruitment picture at age 17. And the last panel, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a picture of when he was back in Holland in 1983, I think. He took Murray with him for the 40th anniversary of the liberation of Holland. And he's there with some of his mates. And that's the Joe that I remember, so that'll be that picture. The others will have various scenes depicting either battles or significant events throughout his military career. And that wall will be a wall of honor. So I tip my hat to the Power family and particularly to Joe. Now, Frick is going to tell you a story that just dovetails, we have to use that word, nicely into what I just told you. Frick, are you on your little
Yes.
sneaky camera there?
Actually, I'm going to make it bigger. Oh, big frick cam.
Can I eat while you're doing that?
Sure. So we recently went on vacation, and as we've told some of you before, I hold barbecues to raise money for the vets every second Saturday here locally. Well, the last time we did one, I left our new griddle out. It was a Blackstone 36-inch griddle. They're valued around $800 to $1,000 Canadian. And I left it out because I was going to come back and clean it. Long story short, I did forget. And we left it outside while we went on vacation. And normally that's not a big deal where we live. We live in probably one of the safest places in Canada, probably the world. But when we returned, we found out that it had gotten stolen. So we asked the staff. We thought at first someone might have just put it away, put it
Tony.
inside. We thought, yeah, Tony likes to move things around, so we just assumed that he put it inside, and then we checked with everybody, and sure enough, we determined that it had been stolen right from the front of the shop. So I put a quick message out on the Grand Bay Community Facebook page, and it wasn't, we weren't asking for a new one or any donations or anything like that. I simply said, this is the situation. I do barbecues for combat wounded veterans, and someone had taken our griddle. And within 24 hours, it had over 1,200 shares, which is a huge amount for where we live locally. And some people offered to send us money right off the bat without even knowing us or knowing me personally. And I said, let's wait a few days before I take any money and see if it turns up, because that was the point of the post, just to see if it would be returned. 3 days had passed and nothing, and a gentleman contacted me, and his name is Joe Power, and I've never met Joe before, and I didn't know the story that we just heard from Rob, so he messaged me privately and said, I'd like to, contribute, and I would like to get a fundraiser going, and I said, sure. And within 15 minutes, he had raised $1,200 to replace the griddle. And not only that, money kept coming in. One of my other friends, Megan, she asked some old friends of ours. She was able to come up with $500. The local Pizza Delight donated $500. Just an incredible showing of community in our part of the world. And we ended up raising, obviously, enough to cover the griddle. We had some extra left over, which will go to outfit parts of the kitchen as well as an outdoor eating area for the vets. And as a kind of a thank you, I'm going to throw a barbecue for the community as well. So just a really feel-good story. It was great to have Joe, who is the grandson of the Joe Power, the story you just heard. So it was great to have him involved in it. He was able to see the shop for the first time, and it's great for the community to come together and make donations and feel good, and we can't wait for them to see us having the vets back and what we're doing here. So it was a great way to not only raise money for a new griddle, but raise awareness for the cause, and it worked out really well. So I want to thank everyone locally that contributed and donated to get us a new griddle and some extra money for the vets. So thank you again.
Young Joe was born the year after old Joe died, so he never actually met his grandfather. But the best part of this of all, just like we did with Herman, Joe's family knows very little. Murray, who would probably be the most in touch, just little wee snippets, wouldn't be enough to write 2 paragraphs. But Luther, the uncanny devil that he is, knows where to dig, no stone unturned. He went to work. He calls me every day and gives me an update, and he's getting more and more fascinated at these SD&Gs, what they did, how many battles they're involved in. It was phenomenal, and narrowing it down to actually focus on Joe as well. So the family is going to be thrilled, and what a way to honor them by being able to give them some information about their father. Fantastic, and Grand Bay, we get great support here. It's fantastic. Lovely. I need a new word. Okay, any more vets to say hello to, Megan?
Jake Torola.
Hey, Jake, brother, how are you? I wore your sweater the other day.
Abby.
Ebby, and well, Ebby, I met Ebby because Ebby was on last time, but something he just showed me too. I was right on Facebook. I can't remember what it was. Hi, Ebby. Anyone else?
Yeah, there's one more.
Kevin, not Kevin Burris, but is Kevin Smear on?
Sean McDermott.
Oh, Sean. The Sean Shim. I just said to Jake today, when are we going to have enough of these that we don't run out? Hopefully there's more Sean Shims coming soon. Great idea, Sean. Okay, any more? Or are we back to questions? Did I get everything covered? Oh, Jack. Jake, let's acknowledge.
I got the list.
You got the list?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to acknowledge, tell you the story. I've got a couple of good stories to tell you. We, this whole COVID thing, which has just turned our lives upside down, we in Canada, in New Brunswick, so those of you that don't know, Canada is made up of 10 provinces and some territories, and 3 territories. The United States has 50 states and some territories. Well, we were so locked down that we were not allowed to travel outside of our own province. In fact, there was a period of time we couldn't even travel within our own province. But they had talked about opening up the 4 Atlantic provinces, which would be New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. This would have been back in late spring. So we thought, well, you know what? Because of Tony, we've got enough contact with enough combat wounded vets in that area that we could do a class. So we planned it. And remember, in order for us to do a class out here, we have to start planning it back here. So we put a call out. We had all kinds of vets apply. We started to go through the selection process. Well, that never did open, so we weren't able to do it. So Jack, who heads up our bench brigade, was all geared up to help us because we only had 1 or 2 Canadians that were going to make benches for us. Because of the bench brigade, the whole purpose is to allow civilians to provide a bench so that every combat wounded vet takes a bench home in addition to the tools we send them home with. But we had a friend, Lloyd Chachuk up in Ontario, who had volunteered to make 2, but unfortunately Lloyd unexpectedly died. Now we also had one out in Western Canada as well, and we now have one, and we had one in Newfoundland, who is one of our combat wounded vets that came to our class. Anyway, Jack and a bunch of Americans stepped up to the plate and said, we'll provide the benches. So we just received them the other day, and we're just in the process of putting them together. We received 5 benches. I told Jack, I said, I'm thoroughly impressed with this. These were well made. And I want to just give a little shout out to those guys who did this. So, Rick Horseman in Moncton, New Brunswick. Now, Rick's one of our Canadian volunteers, and Rick is making which will be bench number 14, so we'll be all set. Larry Bemler in Springfield, Vermont, made one. Joe Lapalito, hope I pronounced that right, in Worcester, Mass, made one. Mike Bailey in Mayport, New York, made one. And Lloyd, who had passed away, Lloyd lived in Sudbury, Ontario. Lloyd originally had volunteered for 2 benches. So Josh Faust and Daniel Gang, E-N-G, teamed up to build one, and Kyle in Newfoundland is building the other. Ed DeSantis in New Hartford, New York. Ed built his bench. I'm going to read you this. Ed built his bench, or this bench, with a team of young people that include his daughters Gabby, Ruth, and Emma, and their friends, Anthony, Robbie, and Juice. That sounds like either Rex or Bo. During their Christmas holiday, these American college kids took time out of their Christmas break to build a workbench for a Canadian vet. That's just cool, says Jack. Everyone signed the bench at the bottom. I didn't realize that, so I'll make sure I know that. And some actually wrote a note to go with the vet that receives it. So this is exactly the way it's supposed to be, and I am so proud to be a part of it. Next, Frick.
All right, next question comes from Luke Deedman in Cumbria, England.
Hi, Luke. Come be. I really miss. I might just tell this real quick. So of all the places I've taught, Canada, United States, and England, England audiences, I always found the most fascinating. They always knew more. If I was standing there demonstrating dovetails to them, 9 out of 10 were watching me saying, what does he do different than I do? I do them over here, and half the audience is wondering what I'm doing. The other half is, wow. But very few actually had done it, at least when I first started. So I really enjoyed it, and I miss it. I used to go over there yearly and do a show. Anyway, those were the good old days. So go ahead with the question, Frick.
Yeah, question comes, okay, so do you have any use for a keyhole saw with furniture making?
Keyhole saw is kind of a very aggressive tooth. It certainly would never be anything you would use for a finished cut. So I would tend to say probably not. I can't remember ever using a keyhole saw. No, I don't think so. Don't think so. It would be good for piercing if you had to start a cut somewhere, but I think I would find something that's a little more fine cutting than the keyhole saw. So my answer to that would be no. Next, Frick.
All right, next one comes from Rich Hedman, who is a U.S.
Hi, Rich.
Retired U.S. Navy chief in Cedarburg, Wisconsin.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate your service.
He says, I just retired and almost
Oh. Can I tell you about something real quick? Because Rich just triggered it. So, hold that thought. 2 days ago? Yesterday. When did CBC come?
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Thursday. It was Thursday.
Thursday? So 2 days ago. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I got to take a minute to explain this. So the American, you know what? I really don't care. Americans, Canadians, to me, they all deserve our thank yous and whatever we can do for them. But I was a little disappointed that we hadn't had enough exposure in Canada. So Jim from Moncton, which is about an hour and 45 minutes away, came down here about a month ago to pick up, buy some tools. We don't get very many walk-in customers. So I usually take them and give them the whole tour. And when he heard the story that I just told you, that we didn't have enough Canadian volunteers to take care of our Canadian vets, well, he had to do something about that. So Jim had recently downsized, and he had a nice shop, 2-car garage, and his wife said, well, you're going to have to get rid of these tools. So what Jim did was contacted the city he lives in, and they had recently taken their city wood shop and moved it to a new location under one roof, which left this building unoccupied. And he came and made a proposal. He says, I'd like to start up a woodworking club, and I have the tools. I need the space. And they said, we've been waiting for you. So they provide him with the space, everything fantastic. And their club only started a year ago, and it has blossomed. Well, he took this back to the club, and then I started getting emails. Reminds me of Jack. You know, Jack thanks me every day for allowing him to do this. It's so fulfilling. Jim's the same way. And the club members have embraced this, and they committed to building 10 benches. So they keep sending me pictures of all the benches and how they're coming along. Well, the lady who runs the club up there, she has a close friend who is a senior reporter with CBC. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It kind of comes coast to coast. And I had said, well, look, if you're going to do a story, you may as well come down here and do it right where the benches are going to end up. So they came here on Thursday, and they interviewed Tony, and they interviewed Al, our 2 combat wounded vets. They interviewed Jim and his friend that was with him. They interviewed me, and it'll broadcast, and we'll put it up on the site so you can see it. But I tip my hat to Jim for the way he's taken this and really doing a great job with it. And it's just fantastic to see. So great support. And the reason I said all of this, because the gal who was here from CBC, her dad is a World War II vet, Navy vet, had his ship blown out from underneath him by a torpedo. He's still alive. And hopefully we're going to get contact with him, and we're going to do another Luther documentary. Stay tuned. Okay, sorry, Frick, go ahead. You triggered something there. Finish that question, please.
Yeah, okay, so Rich Hedman, U.S. Navy chief, retired. I just retired and almost, oh, shoot, my mic wasn't on. I just retired and almost have my new shop building complete. Once I have the drywall up and painted out, what is the one piece of advice you would give me to make my shop as functional as it can be?
Oh, wow. One piece of advice? Well, if you're going to limit me to one piece of advice, lighting. Lighting, lighting, lighting. You can't get too much light. And these are LEDs. Jake did all of this in here. What's the rating on them?
Well, I use
65s?
65 just because of our filming.
Yeah.
Anything over 5K would be fine.
Yeah. Lighting. Get great lighting. Don't have any places where there's shadows. So we put lights everywhere. That would be my number one piece of advice. You can't see it, you can't do it. Next, Frick. Good question, too, by the way.
Okay, next one.
And I could have gone on for half an hour on that one.
Next one comes from Mike Bailey in Bayport, New York.
Hey, Mike.
It looks like you have a split ductless air conditioner near your chop saw and above your pipe clamps. Is sawdust an issue for this type of AC? How often do you have to clean the filters?
Oh, yeah, I do have what is that called? I do have a heat pump. I guess we better take a look and see. I thought every once in a while I think about it. I wonder if there's dust getting in that. It's blowing out air now? We'll have to look into that. But I mean, we've got a filter up here. We've got a Powermatic filter. You want to focus on that, Jake? Up there that cleans our air. And then we've got a great dust collecting system. Jake designed the dust collecting system and had stuff specifically made. Our main dust collector is in the other shop, which is nice because when we turn it on, it's not too loud.
What are you doing?
Wow,
You can't do that.
it's really quiet when you do that.
Open it up.
It's Jake's. He gets rather possessive. You got a 45-second delay on it? You can adjust the delay. So when you're using a saw, you can shut it off and make an adjustment, turn the saw back on, and the dust collector will still be going. Now you got to sit and listen to it for another 30 seconds. Next question, Frick.
Just a second. Okay.
Loud.
Tony Latino in Kissimmee, Florida says, what power tool has changed your perspective or workflow the most?
What power tool has changed your
Perspective or workflow the most?
perspective or work?
What power tool has changed my perspective or workflow the most? Probably the saw stop, the table saw. The table saw is, these are going to rust. The table saw is the number one power tool in your shop. So if you've got a lousy table saw, I grew up using my first table saw was at my father's shopsmith. Oh, what a nightmare. I'm surprised I still have limbs. On the saw stop, instead of the blade tilting, the whole table would tilt.
On the shopsmith
On the shopsmith, what did I say?
table, on the saw stuff.
Oh. And it was just, as a kid using that, I can't believe my father let me. It's just a nightmare. No, there was no guards, there was nothing. Anyway, so if your table saw is great, then everything else will seem to work a whole lot better. But if you struggle with your table saw, whether it's a lousy fence, and fences used to be terrible, if it's a lousy fence, whatever, it's always just going to add frustration. So I would say a table saw would be the most influential in terms of impacting all your work, and I would do a commercial for saw stop for free. In fact, I just did, every time somebody comes in here and mentions it, they end up getting a 20-minute blurb out of me because I'm so impressed with how well that saw works. And Nick will be able to tell you that same thing. Have you even got yours up and running yet? No. You just took possession yesterday.
I just got it yesterday,
Yeah, next time Nick's here, we'll ask him what he thinks. Great saw. Good question. Next one, Frick.
All right, this one comes from Benjamin Adair in Rockport, Texas.
Hey, Ben.
He says, what is the best way to clean the 300 grit side of my trend after smoothing my 16,000 Shapton? Thanks.
I never bother. I usually just rinse it. If you need to, there's a little white eraser. We hardly even use it ever. There's a little white eraser, and that's exactly what it is. And you can just use that, and it'll clean it up quickly and nicely. But when it comes to using it for flattening your Shapton stones, I just rinse it. I've never had to go in there and do anything like that. Next, Rick.
Dean in Texas
Hi, Dean.
asks, what are the appropriate rasps needed for furniture making, size and grain?
Stay tuned, Dean. We just shot that video today. We started it last night. We finished it today. That'll go up sometime in the next couple of weeks. So I'll spare throwing that all at you again. But you want a cabinet maker's rasp. They're round on the top, flat on the bottom. You want one somewhere around a 9. I'll just tell you real quick. So they go in coarseness from 1 to 15. 1 is coarse, 15 is fine. They get a little more expensive as they get up here too because they're harder to make and they're done by hand. So I would say you'd want one in the 6-7 range. If you can afford it, you want one in the 12-13 range. And if you can afford it, get the 15. I love that one. That would be the 3 cabinet maker's rasp that I would want. The rat tail, it's round and tapered. Definitely want one of those. And I have an ironing rasp, which is flat across its width, but curved this way. So you can go in and use it to spot remove, and that's great too. So, but the video's coming. It's a little more detailed. Watch for it. Next, Frick.
Okay, Joe Phillips in King George, Virginia
Hi, Joe.
says, what are the advantages or disadvantages of an open throat router plane compared to a closed throat router plane?
You know what, Joe? I don't know. I've never used one. I hear about that, talk about it all the time. I've never bothered to even look into it. But what is this, open or closed? I don't even know.
Open.
This is open? Well, this is just dandy. If closed means it's a bar across there, then I don't know. I have never had want for anything other than that when it comes to that particular router plane.
Now, Lee Nielsen has the large router planes with a closed throat in stock.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, but not the open.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's a very big issue. And I've never had a situation where either of those two couldn't do the job. So that's the best I can tell you. Next, Rick.
Okay, this next one is from Andrew Hedgem in Washington.
Hi, Andrew.
He says, you talk about getting a piston-tight fit on drawers. How loose can it be before you can't push it by the one corner close test?
How loose before it won't do that? Well,
Depends on the size.
yeah, that's a good point. If it's a drawer that is wider than it is deep, then it's going to bind real easy. It's going to bind a lot sooner. If it's a drawer that is narrow
Like your little ones right
and
there.
deep, like which ones?
Right there.
Like,
That size,
Well,
it
these are
wouldn't
short.
bind very easily.
yeah, I mean these are just scrap. These are prototype, right? And there's no fancy fit on those, but they move quite easily. However, if the drawer was this way and you did that, it would bind for sure. So that question really doesn't have
A definitive
a
answer.
definitive answer. Thank you, Jake. Love drawers. Absolutely love making drawers. What did we just do? When he said that, I was...
Right there.
Oh, yeah. So on the online workshop that you should all sign up for, we do 3 45-minute episodes each week, and we go through the building process. We've been working on shop furniture, so I'll just show you some of the stuff we've done. We did this little cabinet over here, and this. The nice thing about shallow drawers is whatever's in them is visible. You put stuff in a cabinet, and you get to see what's right here, but you got to move a bunch of junk to see what's back there. So I'd much rather have drawers. So seeing as it's by the drill press, I have drill press related equipment. These are my big Forstner bits. I actually call it a sawtooth, and that's made by, no, it's not a sawtooth, what do they call it, a wave. These are made by Fish. These are expensive, but oh my goodness, they work well. This one has some of my lettered and numbered drills. And this one has some long, I haven't even filled these up yet. This one's got a whole bunch of little things in there, from plug cutters to countersink bits. But it's nice to have drawers like that. And we did this one more or less. This is what started the whole thing. We just did this to hide the electrical panel. But then we decided to go with that theme. So we made, this was the most recent. Like I said, we just finished that one. That's for the dust mask and whatever. We did this one on the online workshop. And this is where we store all of our router bits. And they're all put in there according to the type. And over, oh yeah, we made this cabinet. And this cabinet is on wheels, and it holds all of the power tools. So if we have to move it, we can. We made this one, which is the chop saw. And we've got lots of drawers on here as well. These are long and deep. These need to be, actually, that really never got finished. That needs a little more work. We did this bench. This is the same style as the Cosman workbench, only we did it using 3 sheets of 1-inch MDF. And we used, all the stuff we're doing in the shop is typically pine and Douglas fir. But this was designed to be a bench to do stuff that you wouldn't want to do in your woodworking bench. And we got a few more pieces to do. Anyway, lots to learn in there. So what was the question? Oh, the drawers. Yeah. So width, wider than it is deep. That requires a much closer fit. Deep as opposed to width, you can get away with less, but shoot for the best. Next, Frick.
Quick question from Rex Hansen. He wants to know.
Hey, Rex.
You say that fish drill bits work well. How are they better than other bits? I know they last longer, but do they cut smoother or what?
So the fish bits that are made in Austria, not Australia, Austria. I always think I put another shrimp on the barbie for me. Fish bits made in Austria. The first thing I noticed is the point is actually centered. So when they bore a hole, you get some of the cheaper ones, you bore a hole and it stair steps off to the left or the right or wherever. These cut so accurately. They come sharp and ready to be used. So probably the single biggest difference, I don't know if it's in the materials, but it's in the machining. They are so well made. And then you get the fish twist bits, and the brad points that I have over here. Now, didn't we do a video where we went in and we cut it open and showed? So here are the twist bits. In fact, we've been out of stock for these for how long?
A while.
And we don't even know when we're getting more. But these will cut such a clean hole. They are sharp as a razor up along the side, so you never want to wipe it like that to clean the flutes out. It is so sharp. But we would drill a hole on a piece of wood and then go in and cut on the bandsaw and show you the inside, and it looks like it's been polished. Just deadly accurate. But a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is $120 or something. Not cheap, but they are good. And I always tell people, I said, if you're going to buy them, just use them on good stuff. But they work so well, you end up using them on everything. Next.
This one is from Glenn in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Hi, Glenn.
How do you flatten your sharpening stones if you don't have a flattening hone or a diamond hone?
Well, how do you flatten your stones? You can always use a hunk of granite or a piece of float glass, not plate. Float glass is flat. And a piece of wet dry sandpaper, tape it down and do that. And that'll work, but that's penny wise, dollar foolish, because wet dry sandpaper is expensive. You're not going to get very many flattenings per piece. And in a couple of months' time, you will have spent more money on sandpaper than if you'd gone out and bought one of our diamond plates. So I used to rub 2 water stones together, but I realized in teaching, trying to get other people to do that if you slide off too far, and you can actually end up wearing opposite patterns into each other. One guy came to a class one time, and his stone was like that, and his other stone had the opposite in it. So wasn't quite as good a job as I used to think it did. So probably your safest bet would be float glass or a diamond or a granite plate and a piece of sandpaper, wet, dry sandpaper. Next, Frick.
All right. Next one comes from Les Nightingale in Enterprise, Oregon.
Hey, Les. I used to live in Oregon.
Rob, in your recent video on fitting a cabinet door, you said that when planing the edge of the door, you would always end up with a hump in the middle. Why is that? I thought planing was the ultimate way to get a flat surface.
So I think I talked with David Charlesworth before. I don't know if we can come to an agreement on why it happens. But what Les is referring to is that if you proceed to plane the edge of anything with a hand plane, that you will eventually end up creating this. I'll give you a little something to think about. If I took this piece of wood over to the jointer, it's too short to demonstrate on. This is a power jointer. In-feed table, out-feed table. Tables must be parallel to one another. They're not on the same plane, but they're parallel. So this is your cutter head. The top of that cutting circle right here needs to be at the same height as the outfeed table. So as you start with the infeed table lower, you pass the piece of wood over the cutter head. What it removes gets picked up by the outfeed table. So then, and if the two tables are parallel to each other, and this is at the proper height, as you're making your cut, it'll end up, when you get on this side, it'll lay nice and flat. Everything's great. You come out with a straight edge. On a hand plane, you're using a flat piece of steel with a blade sticking up in the middle, right? So as you're running your board over there, it's just, it doesn't work. Meaning, and I can't quite understand it other than to show you the difference between the two. If I continue to plane this, it will eventually be convex. So knowing that, you have to work around it. So what I'll do is I'll get it cleaned up, meaning flat, smooth, then go back in and hollow out the middle, not touching the outside or the far side, and then eventually, once you get a little bit of a hollow in there, start planing, and hopefully you'll stop just before you go from concave to convex. So you have to learn to work around it. If I can't tell you anything more than that. That's just, it's one of those things. You learn to work around it. You live with it. But it gives you such a wonderful surface. I guess it's worth the extra effort. Good question, and thanks for asking it because I got a chance to point that out. A lot of people don't realize that. Next, Rick.
This one comes from Jim Fuller in Katy, Texas. He says, I want a plane that is inexpensive and produces a wispy shaving after sharpening. What do you recommend for the budget woodworker?
Okay, Jim is his name?
Yes, Jim Fuller.
In Katy, Texas. And he wants to know a budget plane. Well, Jim, we are about to shoot a video. Any idea what this costs?
What? Oh,
This-
I think it was $220.
Okay, I'm going to show you a couple things, Jim. By the way, just before I get into this, we do these things for you as a service and also as a way of raising funds to run our Purple Heart project. Oh, I forgot to mention. Wow, we started buying airplane tickets. Whew, have they gone out of the way? What are we paying to bring in the one vet from Newfoundland? Is it almost $2,000?
I think it's 14
$1,400 Canadian or American?
Canadian.
Canadian. That's a flight that used to cost $300 or $400. $1,400 now, so I don't know what's, anyway.
It's like an hour-long flight, isn't it? Or less?
No, it's more because he's got to go to Montreal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
not
we
far,
couldn't
though.
get him a direct flight anyway. Anyway, so things are going to be a little more expensive. So we certainly appreciate your support, and glad you're able to do what we are able to do, which makes us all feel great about helping these people. So anyway, you get a chance to donate to go towards the Purple Heart Project. Do it right off our website. Then no fees get taken out. We give you the opportunity to win lots of great prizes. So it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to make a donation to register, but you can register. Tonight we're giving away as we always do, thanks to Moose. And if you don't get one of these, but you want one, go to patsecretgarden.com. Frick will put the link in, and you can get a dead cat sweater. Warmest garment you will ever wear, I promise you that. And we use them in the winter. We take them out on the boat with us because sometimes they're coming back at school. So you get 3 dead cat sweaters or Purple Heart golf shirts, your choice. These are our own T-shirts that you're welcome to pick up. We're going to give away, thanks to Tony Bahadur. Tony got 3 of these really cool pens with a bolt action. It's really neat. And we're going to give away, at every $1,000 increment, we're going to give away either a tenon saw or a joinery crosscut saw. And there's no limit on how many we'll give away. It just determines by how well we do tonight with donations. Now, what I wanted to show you was this. Talking about a plane for a budget. So the best by the way, in a 5.5 or a 6, so this is a plane that I would recommend to anybody. This is a 6. Probably have to end on this one because it's going to take me a minute to explain. We'll see how far we get.
Frick,
Just let me get some of this out of the way.
get the draw ready.
Well, people may still want the opportunity to register.
Can do
Okay.
that now.
May as well get rid of these two. Just a second. Big shout out. Oh, that's what I wanted to do. Big shout out to Danny Bell. Danny Bell, one of the most memorable vets that we've had in our program. We stay in touch. Danny retired officially. Actually, it happens Monday, but he got his DD-214 yesterday. Danny was a helicopter pilot. He flew Chinooks for Special Forces. Chinook was that big, monstrous helicopter with the 2 big props, one in the front, one in the back. And Danny is moving closer to us. He's going to actually be down in New Hampshire, so Jake's going to see him here sometime soon. So Danny, appreciate everything you do, brother. All the best. We'll be in touch. So, planes. There's a 6, there's a 5.5. Okay? So the only difference between these 2 planes is the sole on the 5.5, upon the 6 is 2.5 inches longer. Same front knob, same rear tote, same blade, chip breaker, same lever cap, same frog, same everything. By the way, that's the Adjust Star. If you want to improve your planing performance, fantastic. Thanks to Paul up in Ontario, who is a genius, helps us develop so many products. This is what you want to get. If you want the best, buy Lee Nielsen. They make the best planes. However, they're not cheap. If you want one that will perform as well as the Lee Nielsen, but not all the superfluous stuff that makes it so much nicer to look at, then you buy a Wood River. Problem is, they're not available, they're back ordered, and we do have no idea when they're coming. None. Fortunately, we've put away enough for 2 classes of vets, but we don't know when the next are coming. They gave us a date of 2024. Can't believe it. And what do you do if you can't do that? Well, we're about to do a review sometime in the next week on a bench dog 5.5. I haven't even opened it. It's still in the plastic. We'll let you know what we think, and you get to see that video. Now, if the Wood River is how much? What were they? 280?
270.
279.
269.
269. So 270, sorry. This is what?
220.
So $50 less. Now, I will tell you that we just recently did a review of the Lee Nielsen router plane compared to the bench dog router plane. Now, I'm not a fan of copycats, but there wasn't any difference. There was very little difference between the 2 planes except for a little bit of money. However, you got to find a plane, you got to find a plane. So you might possibly have an option there. Is there anything less expensive than a bench dog that I would recommend? Haven't seen it. We tested that Amazon, what's it called?
Basic.
Basics.
Amazon Basics. garbage. Don't even waste the postage on that thing. That was pure junk. And most everything under that price is going to be. So, next option. Here is an old number 6 Bailey made in Canada. It's got to be good. I have a customer a student that's coming to the class next week, and I told him he didn't have a plane, and unfortunately we can't help him. But I said, I'm going to fix this up. You can either buy it or just use it for the week and leave it here. But this is a decent plane. Actually checked the sides. One was perfectly square, one was out a little bit. Ken will fix that for us. Say hi to Ken tonight. He's online with us. He's away with his family. I'm going to go through. I've got some old Lee Nielsen handles that from way back. We'll make these fit, so we'll get rid of these ugly ones that were on there, and somebody butchered them. So we'll take care of that part of it. We'll clean this all up, put a new blade. Hopefully we'll have an IBC blade that'll fit it. I'm going to clean the face of the frog. So there's some work that can be done to this to make it a better plane. And we'll see. We can actually put an adjuster on there as well to make it easier to adjust. So if you're on a budget and you need to have a plane, if you're willing to put in, when we do this, we're going to document time, materials, everything in order to get that up to a performance level plane. And then I'll be able to better tell you whether or not it's worth it. I would suggest that the problem is this. Most people that are looking for that experience obviously don't have it when they start. Yet they've got to go in and try to make this plane work well. They have yet to define the word well. So how do you take the piece of equipment that you're going to use and bring it up to this point that you don't even know about yet? That's difficult. So that may not be an option for everybody. All right. And one last question, Frank. Get a short one.
Just a second. Luke in England wants to know, how would you plane thin lengths of wood?
Oh, good question. So the easiest way to do plane thin lengths of wood is to get a piece. I used to use double-sided tape, but sometimes the double-sided tape is so sticky that it will. Are we going to start selling this stuff, Jake? This stuff is great. This is stronger than painter's tape, stickier than painter's tape, not as sticky as masking tape, but the fact that it's strong, it's really good. So what I typically do, if it's really thin, meaning some wood you can just put up against...
But this isn't your new method.
Huh?
This isn't your new method.
What's my new method?
MD.
Oh, right. Okay, well there, Jake just reminded me. If it's not too thin, you can just put it up against the bench dog and plane it. You try to clamp it and it'll bow. And that will allow you to come in and you can go ahead and surface that. If it's really thin, it'll bow out here in the process of doing this. So what you have to do then is one of two things. Jake just reminded me, the best one to date is I take a piece of MDF. I had no idea what I did with it. A piece of MDF and put a piece of, shoot, I hate it when I don't find things just like that. Get yourself some of this. This is great sandpaper. 220 is probably coarse enough. This is made by Porter Cable. We should probably sell this stuff too because I use so much of it. So this is self-adhesive on the back side. And what you do is you get yourself a piece of MDF and you stick that on there. And then you simply put that thin piece of wood, just lay it on there and plane it. And the adhesive will hold it in place while it planes. It's lickety-split, easy to do. The other thing I was going to tell you is actually not quite as easy, and that was to take a piece of masking tape, like so, and I usually just put that down inside there, and then clamp it like that. Put the piece of wood that you're going to plane like that, and then you can go ahead and plane it. And because you're pulling as opposed to pushing, you can plane it really thin without an issue.
Well,
And then
no,
just
it has an
take it
issue.
out.
If it's too thin, you actually get that. You introduce that step.
Yeah, that's right
Back
too.
here.
So, well, all you need to do then is make sure you have your
Right.
tape is full length.
And the bench
But
top.
this stuff is sticky enough that it'll pull some fiber off too. So the best option is probably the sandpaper on a piece of MDF and set it on there. And that should be a hack that we should do a video on. Okay, I think that's it. It's 9 o'clock. Let's give away some stuff. And next time we see you, here's what we're going to do. Are we going to try to do, wouldn't it be nice to do a live some night when the guys are here in the class?
Yeah.
I think we'll try that.
Well,
Instead of that Saturday,
We only have one night.
what night?
Well, no, sorry. I should say we can't do it that Saturday anyway.
No, yeah. So the next one we're going to do it and we'll let you ask questions of the guys in there. Because we could never do this before because we were somewhere else. But now that we're here and we've got it so close, we're going to do that for you and that'll be fantastic. Frick, let's give some stuff away. What are we doing?
all right.
Start with the dead cats.
This is really cool. My green Perrier bottle makes me invisible. Okay, let's see.
We're at 2,300.
So we're giving away two saws.
Okay, we ready?
Where'd Megan go? I film well? Didn't look at. By the way, Megan is due the end of November with their first baby, which is going to be a garçon.
Another boy. You have 0 female grandchildren.
I have 0 female grandchildren. Yes, this little Robbie will be.
Probably because 2 daughter-in-laws was enough.
So little Robbie will be grandson number 6.
All right, we ready?
Yes, we're ready.
All right, first winner. What is this for? Dead cat?
Dead cat. Where are we sending it?
Dead cat is going.
Dead cat or golf shirt? Your call.
Dead cat is going to Mel.
Oh, wait, Santa Claus. Forgot almost. Great to have you here, you and Mrs. Claus. They are the big chunk of support behind what we do. So always shout out to them.
Mel Bellingham in United Kingdom.
Mel
Mel Bellingham,
in the UK.
UK.
Mel, those cold, damp nights, that dead cat will hug you like you've never been hugged. Tell us which one you want. Congratulations.
All right. other one?
Next.
Next winner is Mike Quinn in Illinois.
Mike Quinn in Illinois. Illinois in the wintertime, you want a dead cat. Next one, Frick.
What is this for?
Dead cat.
Third dead cat. Is going to Gary Badger in Texas.
Hey, Gary, congratulations. Texas, dead cat. You might want a golf shirt.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to give away a medium tenon.
No, the pen.
We're going to give away a medium 10 with a pen.
Okay.
Medium tenon with.
So
the
medium
pen.
tenon comes with a Tony Bahadur special. It's actually a friend of Tony's that turns them.
Thomas
Cool.
Powers in Radford, Virginia.
Tom, congratulations. Enjoy that saw, enjoy that pen. Write me a note and tell me how well you like it. Number 2.
Number 2 is going to Freeman Ray in the United Kingdom, another UK.
Freeman, medium joinery crosscut coming your way, as well as a pen. Enjoy it. Write us a note. Tell us how much you enjoyed
We
it.
hit 2,500.
25. So let's give away one more thing. Since we have 3 of the pens, let's give away a pen along with a Wood is Good, or whichever one you want. Wood is Good, Wood for Good, Wood Doing Good t-shirt. We'll put the 2 of them together. Who are we going to give it to, Frick?
We are going to give it to Larry McDonald in Kelowna, BC.
Hey, Larry. Beautiful BC. All right, great. Thank you, folks. Appreciate you having here. I cannot wait for our next one when we do it out there with the vets here. They're coming in a week from tomorrow night. Sunday night, we all meet for a meet and greet. Frick does a barbecue. Everyone get a chance to say hello. Murray Power, Joe's son, is going to be here to introduce them and welcome them to the Joe Power Memorial Workshop. We got a lot coming. Wish us luck. We've got a lot of work to get done this week, but we will get it done. Thank you, Luther. Thank you, Super Dave. Thank you, Ken out there. And thank you all those of you who have supported us. Appreciate your help. and the guys that do it appreciate it, and we appreciate them. Have yourself a wonderful 2 weeks. We will see you shortly.